never stop learning and never stop questioning and asking and being curious. I think being curious is such a big thing. There are so many influencers in the content world or people who are very active on LinkedIn who post a lot of sort of shock jockey stuff or make lots of sweeping statements about things and how they should be or how they shouldn't be. And I think that it's important to learn a lot and to read a lot and to learn from a lot of different people, including outside of content.
Hey, welcome back to the Doctor's Den. Today I have Chaviva Gordon-Bennett. She is a seasoned content strategist, editor, and writer with nearly 2 decades of experience in the world of business. She's worked with top companies like BizAboo, SmartBug Media, Tarakeet, EverCommerce, Monday.com, and more. Chaviva holds a master's degree in Judaic studies and lives in Israel with her husband and 3 kids. She's also an amateur geologist and coffee enthusiast. Oh, Chaviva, there are so many places to start, but I really want to start with your email address. Can I start with your email address?
Absolutely. So
Fetch. What is fetch? Wait, hold on. We have to tell me what this is. Okay, Chaviva's email address is quetching.editor@gmail.com.
yes.
Okay, have at it, lady. What's
So
in that? That's
I've
phenomenal.
I've actually had it since I was in college. When I worked on the college newspaper, I was the copy desk chief, and it was around the same time that I was sort of like exploring Judaism, and so I combined I was like learning Yiddish words, and I was like, this is cool, and I'm an editor. And so that became my email address, and then it became my URL for my website, fetchingeditor.com, which is my blog that I blogged at for many, many years. And when I started freelancing, or like when I was becoming more of a professional and applying to jobs, people would say like, "Oh, like that's not a professional. You should use an email address with your name in it." And I was like, "But no, it's a conversation starter." And it really
Oh boy, is it.
it is. I get so many comments on it, and it's really like it's been such a gift. And so yeah, it's who it's
It's
me.
phenomenal.
I
It's so phenomenal.
complain.
You're a complaining editor. I complain. That's my job in life. Leave me alone.
Pretty much.
That's what I
Yeah.
do.
That's what I do.
That's
I'm
so
good
cool.
at it.
Uh, that's a rabbit hole I'm not going down right now. Um, okay. And what? You are a coffee enthusiast. I've recently gotten into coffee, so let's talk about that one for a minute. What
Oh,
does this mean for you?
only recently you've gotten into coffee.
Yes, yes. A friend of
Interesting.
mine introduced me to a thing called a French press,
Oh,
which I did not know existed. And since then, I have tried multiple kinds. I'm right now enjoying Brazil beans because they're really yummy. I tried some flavored ones, things like that. But like, what does this mean for you to be a coffee enthusiast?
so I started drinking coffee when I was in high school, and
Mhm.
so where I lived, there was this place called the Coffee House called the Coho in Lincoln, Nebraska. Shout out to them, because that's where I went to college and grew up. And basically lived there. And when I got to college, I would go there. I would get there like and just sit there for hours. I would be there until like 2 o'clock in the morning. And this was still
Wow.
when in Lincoln, Nebraska, they allowed coffee at the coffee house. You could still smoke indoors. I feel like I'm
Wow.
not
Okay.
that old, but like I guess I am
Oh, we
that
are. We're
old.
so old. We're so. I mean, they used to smoke on airplanes when I was a kid. Like, come
Right?
on.
So like I remember going in and there was like this smoking section in the back, but like I lived there and I drank a lot of really sweet like Irish cream and like super sweet stuff. And then as time went on, the coffee got darker and darker and I was like a hardened journalist and I was drinking black coffee and so I fell in love with coffee then and now I have a Chemex, I have a French press, I have a pour over, I have a coffee
I have a
frother,
pour
a
over.
coffee grinder.
I have a pour over. I have a very cheap coffee grinder, which I don't like using. I rather have the store do the grinding for me because then I can
It's
get
yeah.
like the proper French press grind versus the pour over grind, like
Yeah.
what you need.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
yeah,
Although I will
yeah.
say, so I go to Shuk Cafe in Jerusalem to get my coffee. It's
Okay.
the best in Machane Yehuda. And every time I go there, so my favorite thing in the world, I fell in love with this years ago at Starbucks. It was called a shaken espresso. Now they call it something completely different, but it's basically like shots of espresso over ice, and they shake it up. It gets really frothy and aerated. It is so good.
Ice.
and I fell in love with it. And
Nice.
so I make it at home now. And I have a nano press, which is like, I don't know if you've ever heard of that before.
Nope. No clue.
So it makes shots of espresso, and it's a hand pump. So it's like this little device, and you
Oh,
pump the espresso
cool.
through. It's meant for like camping and things like that.
Yeah.
Like a lot of army folks use them because it's like portable.
Yeah.
And so I have one, and every time I go to Shook Cafe and they're like, how do you want it ground? And I say 3.5. They're like, what are you using? What is this for? And I was like, it's a nano press. And they're like, that won't work. And I'm like, please, like I know that's the grind. Just please, just
Don't argue with me. I know
don't
what I'm
argue
talking
with
about.
me. Seriously.
I mean, someone comes in and says that, you would think that the person goes, this person is obviously well trained and does not need my
Right?
assistance.
Right? You would think, yeah.
Like, I don't even know what 3.5 means, because I go in and I say, I want French press, and they turn it to whatever they turn it and make French
Yeah.
press. Or I go, it's a pour over metal filter. Give me that one.
Uh-huh.
But like, what does 3.5 mean?
I don't even know on this. It's very finely ground because
Okay.
yeah, it's like a real. I can't get it at home in my grinder. Like even if I tried, I couldn't get it that fine. So I have
right.
to buy it at the store.
All right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got into coffee in college. We're gonna just start there then. Like, what? When you went to college, what did you want to do, and why did you choose to go to college?
So college was just natural. I mean, I was always a really good student. I loved school. School was my happy, safe place. And I was a straight A student. I was an honor student. I did gifted education. And I was a huge nerd. Like I loved school. I have these videos of them recording me reading in first grade because I was part of like a special like test program for reading. And so there's all these weird videos of me sitting in a room, like in a corner, like with a book reading and like looking up for approval from the camera. So college was just natural. And also like my dad, he really wanted to go to college. He was in college. He was in the Navy and then he went into university and then he met my mom and my grandfather, my mom's dad, convinced him to drop out of college to work in retail because retail was the future, right?
Of course.
And my dad had actually, when he was in the Navy, he was managing computers on ships in the Mediterranean
Wow.
late during the Vietnam War. And so he had we always think like if he'd stayed in college, like he would have been working for a huge computer company and like who knows what would have happened. So he pushed us real hard also. He's like, don't work in retail, go to college, get a degree. So it was just natural. And I went through lots of things. Like when I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist and then I wanted to be a photographer and then I wanted to be a poet.
Photographer.
That's what you wanted to see? Kindred spirits.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And all of these very sort of like creative pursuits, even though I was very academically minded. And so when I was applying to colleges, I really wanted to go to NYU, but that was like way too expensive, so that was never going to happen. So I applied to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln to be an English major because I was like, I'm going to be a poet. I love writing. Like I'm good at it. That's what I should do.
Yeah.
And during my first semester, I had a dental appointment and I went to my dentist and I was like sitting in her office and we were chatting and I saw up on her wall, she had an English diploma, a diploma from the same university, an English degree. And I was like, how are you a dentist?
What?
Like, how did you get from point A to point B? And she looks me dead in the eyes and she goes, there is no money in English. Change your major now. And it scared me. And I was like, I need to rethink everything I know. Like, what can I do? And around this, at the same time, like I was in an honors seminar for the first semester and it happened to be in the journalism program because it was like the smallest one and I wanted to do that. And so it was all about like, I can't even remember the name of it, but it was like, we went to Washington, D.C. and like, we did all the cool stuff and we learned about journalism and ethics and slander and libel. And I'd started working at the student newspaper as an editor as part of this. Like the professor, she was like you're an English major. Like this is a natural thing. You should do this. And so I just switched my major to journalism and I became a news editorial major. And I thought,
Okay.
I truly, truly thought I would spend the rest of my life in the news business. I was going to graduate. I was going to go, end up at the New York Times, be copy desk chief. Like that was what I was going to do. And I did interned at the Denver Post. I was a Dow Jones News Fund intern. And then I got hired straight out of college as an intern at the Washington Post. And
Wow.
and then I got hired on full time there. And I was miserable.
Journalism is hard.
It is.
It's hard work.
It is. And it was right at that time. It was like 2006, 2007. And that was really when like newspapers were going all in on digital.
Yeah.
And so like reporters were submitting articles and they were going straight to the digital desk, which was in an entirely different building. And
Right.
then they'd come to us on the copy desk. And so the version that you were seeing in the newspaper and the version that was on the website,
Weren't the same.
night and day,
Right.
day. And it got really frustrating. It was like copy editors were slowly falling down the totem pole of importance. And also like living in Washington, D.C. is hard. Like it's a very transient city, like revolving door of people. And it's also a 9 to 5 city. And as a copy editor, I was working like 4 to midnight.
Right.
So no social life, no
Wow.
respect. And like, so I left journalism. People thought I was nuts. I have friends who I worked with there who still work there and who are still very involved in the news business. And people thought I was nuts. They're like, "Why? Who would leave a job at the Washington Post?
Why would you leave a person? Yeah, like seriously. But on the other hand, at the time when it was translating into digital, not only did they go all in, right, but it was like all of a sudden people who were writing needed to be putting stuff out. Like it used to be you could write an article, 2 articles, 3 articles a week, and you were like, really, you were doing phenomenal.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden with digital, like you had to people were, and I'm sure that hit the copy desk like a huge blow because you got all this stuff and you're like,
Yeah.
what am I doing with all this?
Yeah, it was a mad period of time. It was weird. I mean, the upside is that the skills, I mean, were translatable. I mean, honestly, most of the people that I know who were in the news business are no longer in the news business. But they're doing things that are very related. Like I have one friend who's now like a writer and he does like graphic novels, and I have more friends who do editing for a living, but on like the digital side, designers, photographers, like, they're all transferable skills. It's just such a bummer because we were also like young and hopeful and, we all wanted to like change the world through journalism. There is one guy who actually, he started a new digital news outlet in Nebraska called the Flatwater Free Press. And they're actually doing really, really well.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah. So journalism's alive in some ways. It ain't what it used to be.
No. Let's not even get into the ethics of it at this point because that's a whole different discussion, which I don't really want. That's a deep, deep hole.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so you're doing this and you leave. What do you do next?
So I left Washington, D.C., and I moved to Chicago because I'd been sort of long distance dating a guy who lived in Chicago at the time. And I moved to Chicago and I actually applied at like news outlets in Chicago thinking, oh, this will be like a natural, like they'll see Washington Post and they'll just hire me. And that didn't happen. And I ended up getting a job working at the University of Chicago as sort of like the everything person for a Nobel Prize winning economist. I edited his work. I answered his calls. I arranged his flights. I communicated between him and other Nobel Prize winning economists. I was like giving his exams for his for students. Like I was sitting in as like a TA in a lot of the classes. I was actually editing his work. So like he was
Wow.
Yeah. It was like personal assistant / editor / communications manager / brand manager / like it was a lot of different. It was basically like whatever he needed, I was doing it. And like the wildest story was that at one point he got an invitation to speak at this conference in Italy. And he was like, oh, like, I don't want to go to that. He's like, hey, you, Chaviva, like, you should go and give the paper in my place. And I was like, I'm not an economist. I don't have PhDs. I didn't even have a master's at that point. I'm just like little old me. And he's like, no, 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 it'll be fine. Like, I'll explain to them. I'll give you the paper. Like, we'll put the slides together. Like, I'll approve them. You'll just present it. And I was like, are you serious? He was dead serious. He was like
He was dead
completely.
serious. Of course
He had me contact the conference and he's like, she is speaking in my stead. Please book her ticket. And so they booked a ticket for me to fly to Italy. And it was around my birthday, which is in late September. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. It's like a birthday trip. This is like the best thing ever. And what happened was I got to the airport and I go to the ticket desk and they're like, oh, the ticket is booked, but the travel agency did not release the ticket. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And they're like, well, when a travel agency, like they book a ticket, they have to then they have to get paid for and then it gets released. It's like this whole process, I guess. I don't know if it's still like this. And so I'm stuck there at the Chicago airport waiting, like calling Italy and calling the professor and like trying to, and couldn't get a hold of anyone because it was like the middle of the night in Italy. And so then of course I missed the flight and didn't go to Italy. And my birthday was really such a bummer, but he legitimately trusted me enough, like a Nobel Prize winning economist, to go to Italy and present in this massive economic forum. It was isn't it?
Weird.
Bananas. Absolutely bananas.
Oh my God, that's crazy sauce.
Yeah. But
Okay.
so I was there and I worked for him and then I worked for another economics professor for a little bit as well. And then I decided I wanted to go to grad school because I was sort of spinning my wheels in Chicago and wasn't really doing anything. So I applied to grad school and decided to go to the University of Connecticut Storrs. I was debating between Michigan's Connecticut and Brandeis, and I really wanted to go to Brandeis because I'm like Brandeis is like it's like the Jewish Mecca of like academia.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but I ended up at Connecticut. It was a much smaller program, and they gave me more money. Let's be honest. And yeah, went there and got my master's
In
Judaic studies.
and why?
Well, so, at that
What does that have to do with anything? I'm sorry.
so
I wanted to find my direction. I found myself as a Jew.
So at that point, I was actually going through the conversion process. I mean, I'd actually already had a Reform conversion when I was in college. I sort of found Judaism when I was in college, and I had a Reform conversion, and like I was slowly becoming more religious, and I knew that I wanted to do the Orthodox conversion, and so when I was in Chicago, I was going to the synagogue there. And the rabbi who was there, I was like, listen, I'm applying to grad schools. And he's like, if you end up in Connecticut, I know this amazing, amazing rabbi there. You should totally work with him. And I was like, okay. And so it worked out naturally that I ended up at the University of Connecticut and then also ended up working with this rabbi there. So I wanted to teach. Like I was on this path. I'd sort of gone from journalism into like, I don't know what I want to do, into like, I want to be a teacher. I want to be a professor. I want to be an academic. And so I was like, I'm going to get my master's degree and then I'm going to get my PhD and like, I'm going to go into academia and that's what I'm going to do. And so I go out to Connecticut, getting my master's, going through the conversion process and all of that. Like it was a smooth, awesome process. And as I got toward the end of my master's degree, so it was a 2-year program. As I got toward the end, I was like, I need to start applying to schools. And so I decided to apply to NYU for a PhD. And they were like, oh, no, like you can't do the PhD program. And I was like, but I have a master's. And they're like, yeah, but your Hebrew is just not, like, it's not quite there. So like, maybe instead of a PhD, you should get a second and third master's degrees. One of those will be in like the degree you already have in Judaic studies, but then we'll add on to it like Jewish education. And I was like, okay, like I like learning. Let's do that. So I ended up at NYU starting it was a Judaic studies / Jewish education master, like 2 master's degrees. Yeah. And at the same time, like I got married to my first husband. And I was just like, there was so much repetition in the program and I wasn't happy and like my marriage wasn't going so great. And so I made a really tough decision, but like with the help of my professors who were super supportive, with the whole thing, they were like, yeah, they're like, maybe this isn't working out. And I sort of like peaked in a lot of different things. And so I left both a marriage and NYU and went to Colorado. I've always been in like pursuit of something and like, trying to figure out what it is. So I ended up in Colorado because I'd interned there for like a summer and I fell in love with it. And I wanted to get back to Denver, and it happened to be like new start, fresh start, everything's falling apart. Let's go to Colorado. And while I was getting my master's degree, I had started working in social media, doing a lot of work with nonprofits. And like Jewish nonprofits sort of became like my niche because I'm an early adopter, right? I was on Facebook in 2006 when it hit my university, and then 2008 in Twitter, and 2010 Instagram. Like I was always a very early adopter. So I was on social media and I was like, it was still the early enough days where you could be like, I'm on there. I know what to do. I can help you. Like now it doesn't really work that way. But so I was helping Jewish nonprofits. And so when I ended up in Colorado, it's now defunct, but the Colorado Agency for Jewish Education, which is now part of Jewish Colorado, was hiring like a marketing person. And I applied and I got the job like the moment I landed. And so I started working there, and that was like a really cool role because I was like in charge of all of our marketing for all of the different programs that we were doing. And
that's really cool.
Yeah, it was like I was doing print marketing, and I was doing digital marketing and social media and website, and like doing all these really cool things. And I really loved it. And it was an amazing group. It was all women pretty much who were running the place. And it was a really cool foray into like, not just like piecemeal sort of like social media marketing, but like the whole package of marketing. But while I was there, I realized that I was like, I was still searching for something. Like I was happy and like I loved living in Colorado, but like I was still looking for something. And this friend of mine was like, well, maybe what you're looking for is in Israel, Chaviva. And I was like, oh, that's a big step. And he's like, no, like, just like, oh yeah, it's like so easy. You're single, like you don't have any kids, like you're unattached, like it's the perfect time. And I was like, you know what, like, sure, like another move, like that's cool, let's do that. And I applied, and it was like such a simple process. I was worried because being a convert, I was like, oh, like it's going to be such a, so drama filled, but it was really smooth process for me, thank God. In October 2012, I ended up moving to Israel. I made Aliyah. And I kept the job that I had back in Denver because like they were super supportive. They were like, yeah, like we send trips of students to Israel. Like this is perfect. Like you can be man on the ground. Like you can follow them around and like get more stuff. And, you can work during the day. And like they thought, they were thinking very forward thinking. Obviously, like
asynchronous thinking before the internet allowed for real asynchronous thinking.
Right. But it was, alas, it was still too early, and the time zone difference. I didn't have any problem with. Like I didn't mind getting on calls in the evening and stuff, but they started to find it really rough and challenging. So they had ended up letting me go, and before that, like I'd met my husband and we got engaged. I got engaged like super super fast. Wild story though. So I made Aliyah October 2012. November 2012 was when their rockets started being fired. I was living in Jerusalem, and two funny stories. So the first time there were sirens, I was like totally panicked, and I was living in Nachlaot in Jerusalem, and the shelter was like right outside of my apartment, like down some stairs, and there was a big shelter. And so everyone's like running out of their houses in Nachlaot, and we run down the stairs and look at the door, and the door was padlocked with like 10 things of chains and like all sorts of locks. And we're all standing there like who does anybody have a key? and like the city came later that day and like kept the chains.
Israel.
Yeah. And we got like all of us went inside, and everyone's like looking at it. It looked like 1970s like office. Like there were portraits of like politicians on the wall and like office furniture. It was organized. It wasn't just like a storage space. Like it was like they were using it as like an actual office, but they weren't. But they weren't. Like it was very weird. And so when all of that started, several social media folks, Marna Becker and Jesse Nolan and myself and like some other people were tapped by the government. I know this sounds totally made up, to do hasbara, because this was pre like internet now and social media now. It was very sort of like everyone was on Facebook and Twitter, and they wanted a group of social media people to put out positive messaging and like news and like updates and things. And so they took us and they put us, this happened once or twice during this period because it was a pretty short short conflict, I think, at that time. But they took us and they put us in this office building by Malchamal, and they set us up, and they gave us like access to internet, and they're like sit, do hasbara, and we were like, okay. It was the weirdest thing. And so we created like this Facebook page, Stop the Rockets, and like we had this hashtag Stop the Rockets, and like that's where that hashtag had originated, was with us. And it was just like weird. And we did that for like a couple of days. And now I look at like all of the influencers and you know, all the people who sort of like in the spokesman's office and all of these things. And it's so funny to us. Marna and I talk about it frequently. Like, do you remember that time we were important?
When rockets shot at us, I got locked out of a thingy, a safe room, and then wait a second, all of a sudden we found ourselves working for the government.
Yeah, it was weird. Totally unpaid. Totally unpaid, and it was interesting. I met a lot of really great people doing that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Wait, was that the time you got put on an ISIS hit list?
No, that was a bit later. So I was only in Israel for about a year and a half at that point. We moved back to the States because my dad was sick, and so we came back, and we were in the US for about 8 years. And so I had been actively blogging like this whole time on kvetchingeditor.com. Like I was blogging almost every day. It was like the really active days of the blog. And it was starting to like slow down a bit. But while we were back in Colorado, like I was sort of bouncing around different, you know, I worked at a marketing agency and I worked at a tech company and some different things. But in like 2016, I think it was 2016, there was like all of these ISIS lone wolf hit lists that were hitting the dark web. And so the idea was like, hey, you wanna go kill some Jews? Here's a list for you. Don't do the legwork. We did it for you. And so I appeared on one of these lists, I guess. I didn't know that because I'm not on the dark web. But one day I came home from just like running errands, and there was a business card stuck in the screen door of our house. And it said like, please call, with an arrow. And so I took it out and I look at it. On the other side was this FBI agent's name and a phone number. And I was like, oh, this is weird. And I instantly thought it must be for my husband, because I think at that point he had applied for U.S. citizenship. He'd gone through the green card process and he'd applied. I'm like, they're probably just doing a background check or something, but like, why a house call? Don't know.
Right.
So I sent him a picture of it and I'm like, please call this guy. So he calls the guy, and he calls me a couple seconds later, and he's like, listen, he's like, they actually want to talk to you. I'm on my way home. And I was like, about what? And he's like, I don't know. I'll be there in a few minutes. So he comes home, FBI agent rolls up. We're all sitting in my living room, and he's like, I don't want to alarm you. Like, there's no reason to be worried. And I was like, there's just the FBI wants to talk to me. No big reason. And right?
Lord.
And he goes, we just want to notify you that your name and address appeared on an ISIS lone wolf hit list. And we're notifying as many people who are on those lists as we can. And you should notify your rabbi. You should notify, the local ADL if you want. I'm like, shouldn't you guys be doing that? Like, not me. He gave us all this sort of guidance. And he's like, but really, he's like, as far as we know, like no one on these lists has been actually, killed. And so, you're probably, right? So much confidence. It's wild. And so it was funny because we had a friend who had just gotten a job as an FBI analyst. Like, it had been his dream job to work as an analyst, and he'd just gotten a job. And he heard that this had happened, and he goes to this guy and he's like, dude, why didn't you tell me that you were going to someone in my community? Because like, I could have at least like been there or buffered it or something. Cause like, that's scary. And he was like, oh, sorry. And so like for the next year, I didn't tell anybody. We told the rabbi, I contacted the ADL. We told one of our neighbors, who asked me if they should move. And I was like serious. Like, do we need to relocate? And I was like, maybe I should relocate because they have my address. Right. And so for the next year, like I didn't tell anyone. I didn't write about it. I didn't post on social media. I didn't talk about it. And my whole life like has been out there, and I don't like, I share everything, but I was so deeply like scared. And I would be like driving, and I would like stop at a crosswalk for someone to cross. And if I ever saw someone who was like visibly Muslim, and this is not my personality at all, I would panic. I would have like a panic attack. because I was like, this is it. Like they're going to pull a gun out and they're going to like, I seriously was worried for about a year. And then at some point it occurred to me, I'm like, well, I'm still alive and I'm not dead and I can stop being paranoid and judgmental and I can just move on with my life. And so then I posted about it.
That will be fun.
But yeah, wild. But the funny thing about it, so whenever I apply at a job, and there's always the thing, and it's like, share an interesting fact about yourself. They never let me share this.
Why not?
Right?
I don't understand.
I know. It's like, it's an interesting fact.
This is a great story.
Yeah. So at the last company, I'm trying to think, where was I? The past two companies I worked at, they were like, oh no, like you can't share that. And like, we can't unfortunately edit your submission. So like your thing's just going to go out to the company that just is like, new employee Chaviva, and everything's going to be blank. And I was like, okay, I'll just tell people about it later.
Because I'm going to share it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wild times.
Oh, wow. Wait, so you moved back to America because your dad was sick.
Yeah.
What were you doing there? What were you doing while you were there?
I struggled a lot at first. It was really hard to find work, being back in the States. I worked through a lot of connections trying to find things. It took about, I don't know, probably like 6-7 months to find something solid. And my husband couldn't work because he didn't have his green card permission to work either.
Right.
So it was really rough. And then I don't even remember how it happened. Like someone passed my name on to a recruiter for startups in Silicon Valley. And I mean, at this point, like I had mostly worked with like Jewish nonprofits exclusively. I'd done a little bit of like freelance content writing. But my name got passed on to this company called Teforia. And Teforia is an intelligent tea machine. It was using machine learning. So this was 2014, 2015.
Precursors to AI? What?
Yeah.
Precursors to AI? What?
Yeah, 100%. It would like learn your flavor preferences as you updated like how you wanted it brewed in the app and on the machine. It was very cool, like before its time technology, which is probably why it sort of sputtered out. They had a lot of funding. Anyway, whatever. So the recruiter like interviewed me and was like, yep, you're in. And the whole company was like in Palo Alto, and I was in Colorado. And they were like, totally fine. You can work remotely. That's great. And I was the first marketing hire. And so it was like all these engineers, and there was like a team in Taiwan, all these engineers. And then there was like me. And so I had to figure out how to take whatever they were talking about on Slack and translate it for a normal audience, because I took the product to market. I was responsible for building the website, building all the ads, box copy, all of the instructional stuff, the FAQs, the Zendesk, the app language.
You did everything.
I did quite literally everything on that product.
When it comes to product. Wow.
Yeah. And we launched and we sold out like instantly. I think the first 2 days we sold out when we launched it. And then they hired a chief marketing officer who sat over me. And then still we were the only two marketers. But like we went to South by Southwest with the machine, and it was South by Southwest, I think 2015 maybe, where they had like a food tech sort of section. And we were like doing demos of it and stuff. And I'm totally spacing on his name now, but he works with the World Pantry. Oh my gosh, what's his name? He's that famous chef. I can't remember what his name is, but he came and like we demoed for him, and I have all these videos of like us demoing for him. It was very cool. But I worked there for about 2 years, and the CMO left. She'd heard some rumblings that like things weren't going so well, and so she's like, you need to leave. And so on her advice, I left. And it's funny because they actually just relaunched. The company ended up going under, and like the tech was bought, and so it's actually, I think it was just relaunched last month or the month before. A lower price point, because it was really expensive. It was like a $1,500 machine.
At the time, that made sense.
Yeah. So that was cool, but that was really my first. I'd done like the full stack marketing in a nonprofit space, but this was like full stack marketing in a B2C space with a hardware software product, and I just fell in love with it. Like I fell in love with all of the different pieces of it, and so I went from there. I went to a marketing agency, which was a total pivot because I'd been doing, product software marketing. And then I went into this agency, Smart Bug Media. But it was cool because I had, I think, I don't know, 40 different clients at any given time across like B2C, B2B, every vertical. But my favorite client was a senior living community, which sounds
That's awesome.
It sounds so wild. It's this company called Human Good. They're the like 6th largest senior living community company in the United States. Okay. And I didn't realize it at the time. This was before this was sort of like, we knew my dad was sick, but we didn't know what was wrong with him yet. And like, he was getting along, and he like was still working and stuff at the time. And so I started doing all of their content writing and website copy and ebooks and blog articles and social posts, all these different things. And it was like a feel good thing. It was B2C, but it was like B2C you could feel good about because you're like helping people like, at a different stage in their life. And it ended up giving me so much information about being in the sandwich generation where like you're raising children and your parents are aging, and how to sort of deal with that emotionally, mentally, and all of that. And then later my dad got diagnosed with dementia. And now like even today, I'm still like trying to, get my family on board with getting my dad into like a memory care center where he can like sort of live with dignity in a different way than he does at home. And so all that stuff I like learned writing content is very applicable to my life today.
I think that's really interesting. I think that's something that, can we deep dive into that for just a second? Would you be okay? All right, cool. A lot of people like go through the motions of what they're doing, but I don't know how much they actually think about what am I learning from what it is that I'm touching on. Yeah. And I think that what you did or are doing even now, I think, but is that when you do media, when you're working in media marketing specifically, or when you're working in content and copy, and you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for others, you get exposed to a lot of learning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's interesting because there are some subjects where like you become a mini subject matter expert. You just learn what you need to learn and then you get the work done, right? And then there's other things that really have a lasting impact. And I don't even know that when I was doing it at the time, I realized how much I was internalizing of what I was working on. But I've even gone back and I've messaged the CMO that was there at the time. She's still there actually. And I was like, I just want to let you know, like working with your company was like life altering because it exposed me to so much stuff that's really applicable in my life now. And that really made her happy because I mean, you hire a marketing agency to like do stuff, but you don't necessarily expect them to send you an email, 8 years later saying, wow, like it really impacted me. But no, there's a lot of, while I was working there were so many different subjects and things I was exposed to. For a time, there was a pharmacogenetics company that we were working with. And that's something that I really just like, I fell deep down into. I'm like, why is this not like more of a thing? Why is this not a bigger thing? And it's sort of the idea where you can do genetic testing to understand how drugs affect your body, right? Like whether it's absorption or how much you should take or how long you should be taking it, how it's going to impact you. And instead of just blanketly saying like, oh, well, you're a man and you weigh this many pounds and you're this old. So here's your dose. Like, cause there's so much more to it than that. Right.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
And so I like really became a huge proponent and advocate of that. It hasn't really blown up as much as I thought it would by now. But yeah, no, 100%. I think it's important to work on things you're passionate about. In the marketing agency, you're just sort of like assigned whatever they assign you and you just sort of take it on. But I think that, now that I'm freelancing, like I sort of, I'm in the early stages of it, so I'm not really being super picky and choosy. But I think that like as time goes on, like being a bit more picky and choosy and sort of focusing on the things that are interesting to me. I will say that right before I left Smart Bug Media, I was there for about 2 years until the pandemic started. And one of the last clients I got while I was there was actually the Birthright Israel Foundation. And it was great because they were like, Chaviva's Jewish. Birthright Israel is Jewish. Chaviva, here you go. And it was great because I got to like rewrite all their website copy. It was like a blast. I was like, I went on Birthright. Like I can do this.
I can do this. I
yeah,
know about this.
I do. Like I speak your language. And so that was like a fun sort of send off project.
Very cool.
But I left there. It's interesting because Smart Book Media was like, it's a fully remote agency. So like they've always been remote. That's one of like the coolest, best things about them. We had people working all over the world. And but when the pandemic started, it was really challenging because being a fully remote agency, the assumption was like, oh, we're set up for this, like we're going to succeed. But the difference is that parents had kids at home suddenly,
Right.
and they couldn't send them anywhere. They couldn't do anything with them. There was like remote learning, so you're like, I need to be on the Zoom call with a client, but then my kid also needs the computer because they have remote learning. So what do we do? And it was really hard. Like, just sort of saying like, oh, we're remote, we're made for this isn't always the answer because there's so many other pieces. And so I decided to leave and look for other options that were a bit more flexible. And a lot of other people did too.
Flexible in what way?
Flexible in a way that understood the challenges that the pandemic was uniquely bringing to a remote workforce. Because remote wasn't just like the answer. It was so much more. Like there's flexibility, and then there's understanding where people are coming from and where they are. And
I think this is a hugely important topic. We're going to talk about this.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people go, oh, I want to work at a place that's remote, da da da. And there's a difference between working at a place that's remote and it just says we're remote, and a place that actually, in terms of their culture, understands and accepts what remote means in terms of the life of the person.
Yeah.
In the day-to-day. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because I think remote doesn't mean like, okay, you can work from wherever you want, but you're going to be on phone calls from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Like that, that's not like a remote workforce. There's flexibility as well as remote. And like if companies need to say like you're a remote worker and you have to be on from 9 to 5, that's one thing. But that flexible piece is a totally different thing, right? And that's one of the reasons why I'm freelancing now is because I've been remote for the past 10, 12 years, however long it's been. But the flexibility, and when I worked for Teforia, for example, like I wasn't sitting on calls all day. They just wanted me to get the work done when I could get the work done and be available as needed. But in the agency world, like you have client calls, you have internal calls, and it was really like you were on calls from 9 to 5 every day, almost like back to back. And then at some point you had to get the work done. But then you also had to be there for your kids. And then you also had to feed them dinner. And then you also had to sleep at some point, right? And have like a bit of self-care or get some fresh air.
What?
Right?
What are you talking about?
I know, it's a little crazy. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard for companies. Like I get it. It's tough. And even, more recently when I was working, like with Bizzabo, and I was remote in the States and I was remote here because the offices were in New York. I was living in Denver. And so I was, it was a lot of calls during the day. I think one of the biggest challenges in the working world in general is the volume of calls and meetings and like booked time. I don't know how people get things done with the amount of calls and things that are there. And I even like sat down, I think Google for a while had a thing in Calendar where it would like calculate like how much time was being spent in meetings, and then it would like assign a monetary value to that.
It still has that for workplace. Or if you pay for workspace, it still has that.
Yeah. But I don't think anyone like looks at that or thinks about it because there's this assumption that like, oh, well, like there's something that needs to be talked about. Let's talk about it. Or, oh, we have a standing meeting, so we need to have this standing meeting. Or, oh, if we don't meet, then like, how do we know what people are doing? I don't know, like you have to trust people that they're working, like treat adults like adults. And I think there's more value in like trusting people to get things done than there is to having them working between a specific set of time and being on a specific set of calls.
That I agree with. I think it's also depends on, and this is going to sound kind of like techno, like I'm wading into the technical field, but like really there's technology out there nowadays that allows us to look not at how much time the person is spending on stuff, but for updates. And I hate Slack, but for updates on where someone stands on a project. And there's very simple, whether it's a work in progress board, or if there's some other system that someone can go in and go, all right, I'm done with this part of the project. Yeah. Next, right? Yeah. Like there's so many ways to keep track of projects now, or of things that are getting done without needing to meet face to face. I mean, the check-in is nice and the brainstorming is wonderful. Those are places where you need to get in each other's faces and talk.
Yeah.
But really, like, I don't need you to sit there for 5 minutes just so you can say to me, we're on time with everything and everything's going to be great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's what like so many calls sort of were, like going task by task. Like, and those calls are just brutal because then everyone else who's on the call, who is not like working on those tasks related to those tasks, is just killing time, or they're multitasking and not even paying attention. Where,
Right.
and the problem with that is like, I think my favorite thing is collaboration, and like the best moments in life have been when I've collaborated with other departments on things and like created something really beautiful. And I think that when people get meeting fatigue and they're just zoned out because it's not about them, there's a missed opportunity because maybe there's something that they know, something outside of what's happening that could add to it, or they could participate, or maybe they have information they don't know they have, but because they're zoned out, because meeting fatigue, like you're never going to get that. And I think collaboration has suffered massively because of that, because it's a struggle. So yeah. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah. So
I this is such an this is just a topic unto itself. I don't want to go too deep into it, but like when you were working at Smartbug, you're saying you were like basically meeting after meeting. When you were at Taphoria, it was more like, here, do your work, whatever.
yeah.
What's the happy medium there? What from your own experience, where's the happy medium? Because I feel like
Yeah.
it's not one or the other. Like,
Yeah.
there's got to be something in the middle that makes more sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, there is a happy medium. I mean, because when I was at Taphoria, like sometimes I would ask some of the engineers in the office. I'd like message them and I'd be like, hey, like what's going on in the office today? Or like, what have you guys been up to? Because it would be radio silence, sometimes for days at a time. Like I could go a whole week and never hear from the CEO, never hear from the CTO, like never hear from anyone. And I often felt like I must be missing something. And they would fly me out every couple of months, and I would just like be in the office so that I could sort of be there. But even then, like they were like heads down working on stuff. We didn't have meetings, and if we did, it was very product heavy. So you have to have a happy medium, because otherwise, you can't be in the dark. What does that look like? And that's a great question. I think I have yet to work at a company where I feel like they've mastered that. I mean, I think it came close when I was at EverCommerce. I was remote there too, even though they were based in Denver, because my team was dispersed in different parts of the country. But I was also working on a small team there. Like we were kind of hired as a team to do a specific thing. But we met to have like collaborative brainstorming sessions that were very lengthy, but it was like once a week or it was twice a week. It wasn't like every day. It wasn't every other day. And it was, the head of sort of our little project, like he would ask everyone, he's like, what is the best time? Like, when is everyone active? Like, what's going to make the most sense? And it was it was a conversation. It wasn't I'm scheduling it at this time and everyone just needs to show up. Please bring XYZ with you. It was, and we had like a collective, document, and we were like, it was very collaborative, and it was really productive. And obviously like there were other calls with other people because we were working on other things too, but it wasn't as overwhelming, and it felt a lot more like I was more invested in it. I wanted to be there because I felt like he wanted us to be there and he wanted us to be part of the solution. So before I was at EverCommerce, I was at Terrakeet. And so I went through two very interesting situations with Terrakeet and EverCommerce. And I don't know if you've noticed, but like every job I've ever had, I have left for one reason or another. I have only been let go once in my life, and that was from Visibo, and that was last year. But every other job, I've always left because I always see, like I value myself and like my space, and I see what's going on, and I like always leave things. And when I was hired I was hired at Terrakeet, which was like at that point in time, they were like an SEO reputation management company. They're based out of Syracuse, New York. They were like almost fully remote because it was still pandemic times. And now there's a new name that it's not reputation management. It's like ERO, or I don't know. I don't even know. There's a new acronym. But they're really like respected, well known. But when I got the job there, I was hired as part of a specific team. There was a woman who was hired, and they said to her, listen, we do SEO, we do reputation management. all these companies, these are like Fortune 500 companies. These are like the Boeings and the A&Es and like all these huge companies. They also want us to do content for them. And so they hired her and they said, put together a content team. And so she hired me and she hired, there was like 5 other people that she hired all at once to build this team out. So I show up, I think I started on like a Wednesday. That Friday was supposed to be my first one-to-one call with her. And I show up on the one-to-one call. She's not there. She's not there. I wait 5 minutes. I go to send her a message on Slack. This account has been deactivated. And I was like, what? What's happening? What's going on here? And so I said, like, I messaged someone in the HR department. I'm like, hey, I was supposed to meet with her. It was our first one-on-one call. Like, do you know what's going on? And she goes, unfortunately, like, she's been let go. Someone will be in touch. And I was like, what? But I just started here. So then
what am I supposed to do now?
Right? So they pulled all of the people that she had hired that next week into a meeting and were like, listen, like, we're going in a different direction and, you're all new here. And so we're just going to like kind of plug you into different places, like an existing, job titles that existed at the company, and see how that goes. And so it wasn't sort of what I signed up for, but I'm a team player and it was a new job. And so I stuck around for about 6 months trying to make it work in the best way that I could. There were a lot of interpersonal like issues there that resulted in me leaving that job. But it was interesting. And that was my real exposure to SEO, like as a real hardcore sort of like science, like really understanding SEO, which I'm eternally grateful for because it played a huge role in other jobs I've had since then. And so I left there and I went to EverCommerce. EverCommerce was very similar. They hired this guy and they said, build a team because EverCommerce is like, it's a portfolio company. So they are basically, they buy small tech companies that cater to small and medium-sized businesses. So then they have different divisions. And at that time they were trying to like split up their divisions. So they had like the health and wellness division. And then they had sort of like the trades division where it was like HVAC and that kind of stuff. They had all these different divisions. And the problem is that they were trying to like systematize how things got done because everybody was doing things differently. Like of course, when you have like, 25, 30, 50 different companies coming together, like everyone has their own thing. And so they hired us and they're like, brain meld, like mind meld, like create a solution for how we should be doing all of our content creation and all of our branding and like all of these things. And it was so cool. Like we would get together and we'd brainstorm. We like had a team offsite where we got together and just like spent all day like whiteboarding and like it was so cool. But at the end of the day, after like it was also about 6 months, at the end of the day, like we were spinning our wheels because we couldn't get buy-in from the C-suite on the things we were doing. And so pretty much of all of us, I think there were 6 or 7 of us on the team and everyone left at the same time except for one person. We were all just like, all right, like we did what we could. Here's our proposal. Like, we're all heading out. So
see you later.
Yeah. And then I ended up at Visibo.
Okay.
Yeah. So
how much did the stuff that you had learned up to that point really help you or how did it impact your decision about Visibo? And also how did it influence your ability to work there?
I mean, everything, I was a bit on edge applying to jobs at that point because I felt like I just kept making bad decisions and ending up at companies where like I wasn't going to grow or like where they weren't the right fit for me or like there wasn't a long-term sort of path. And so I was really anxious, but all of the skills that I'd acquired, I felt like had really set me up for a large amount of success because I picked up the SEO piece and I picked up the B2B, B2C side of things. I picked up like over time, like I covered so many different things. And when I had applied to Visibo, I had also applied to, I cannot remember the name of the company, but they basically like, they do the ads for podcasts. I can't remember the name of the company. And I was going through the interview processes like at the same time and like everything was sort of happening in sync. But Visibo sounded cooler because it was the events industry. That was an industry I hadn't worked in before. I had sort of touched on it when I was in the agency space. I had a client that did like corporate events and corporate training. They were so fun to work for and so fun to write for. And so I was like, this might be kind of cool. And really what sold me was when I was in the interview process, that person who ended up hiring me, like she was just really, really encouraging. And she's like, no. She's like, you can't take the other job. Like, you have to take this job. and like, as I'm having this call with her, because they offered me the job, and like, I was supposed to have a call later the day with the other company also for them to like tell me about the job offer. So I was talking to Bizzabo, and like, I had pulled into like the Starbucks parking lot, and right next to me where I pulled was a smart car, and it was yellow and black. And those were Bizzabo's brand colors. And I was like, it is a message from God that I should work at Bizzabo. and that's what I told her. I was like, well, I just got a sign, so I guess it's meant to be. So like, let's do this.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's funny because that job was like, what I was hired for was a huge pivot for me, because I'd gone from these sort of like, I'd been working as a senior copywriter, and then I went into content strategist, and then at EverCommerce, I was like content director for that division. And then it paid more, but the job was like just to focus on the blog. It was like, you're only in charge of the blog. And I was like, okay, like that's cool. Like I can do that. I can hyper focus. Okay. And they'd also had hired a head of content around the same time as me. And about 2 months into both of us being there, she was like, you know what? She's like, I don't want to be here. She's like, I want to go back to being a stay-at-home mom, so I'm gonna go do that. And so they came to me and they were like, you like have done all of this before at multiple jobs, so like, do you want this role? And I was like, sure. And so like, I took on all the responsibility, but not the job title, as you know, that happens.
Did it also not include the paycheck?
No, yeah,
exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of like listen, like I was there for about almost 2.5 years. And during that time, like that became sort of my trend. Like, Bizzabo went into sort of hyper growth, and they hired a lot of people, and then they went through several rounds of layoffs, and I survived all those layoffs initially. And I was taking on the role. So I took on the role of like the digital, like I took over the website and managing all of that and all the SEO. And I eventually, like I took over the podcast, and I was being handed sort of all of these different things. And I was happy because in a way, like it was giving me a way to sort of learn those things. But no, it didn't come with pay increases. It didn't really come with any job titles. And the job title changes I did have while I was there were sort of like, put a comma there and like a
put a slash so that you're this. That's.
Yeah, basically. But it was a great industry to work in, and I met a lot of really cool people, like who I'm still friends with today. And it was interesting being exposed to that, especially like at the time period, because it was post COVID, and it was like everyone was getting back to in-person events. It was a very exciting time. But I was really, and also like I started the job when I was in the States, and like obviously when I said like I'm moving to Israel, it's an Israeli founded company. All the C-suite is all Israelis, and so they were like, move to Israel, like go for it, like
have fun.
They were like, oh, you should probably go into the office. And I remember the one time I did go to the office initially was because the CMO had come to town, because at the time the CMO and the CEO both lived in the States, and the CTO was living here. The CEO has since moved back. But the CMO would come in like every couple of months or so. And so I would go up and I would meet with him when he was in the office. And the first time I was like supposed to be there for like a 10 o'clock meeting or something. And I didn't get there till like 10:30. And he's like, where have you been? And I was like, it took me 2.5 hours to get here on the road. Like the traffic was insane. And he's like, you don't have to come into the office. I was like, great. Like I like proved my point that it was like, and also it's all like research, development, product. Like there's no one doing marketing in the office. So it doesn't really, It doesn't make sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So it was good times. I mean, when I was let go, it was like really, it hit me so hard, so much harder than I thought. Like I have always had a bit of imposter syndrome, and I'm a perfectionist, and I'm really hard on myself. And I overprocess like crazy. So after this podcast, I'm going to be like, for the next week, I'm going to be like, oh my God.
What did I say wrong?
What did I
say? I can't believe I said that. Oh my Lord, what did I say? Did I really share that?
Yeah. Yeah. Like for ages.
Lady, you've been fine. You've been great. Don't worry. It's awesome. I love it.
And so, but it really killed me. Because like I said, like I have always left every job I've ever been at, going back to when I started,
Right.
when I started working at the age of 14 at Burger King and then McDonald's. Like I started working really young and I've always left. I've never been let go.
Mm.
And well, except from the Colorado Agency for Jewish Education, but that was not for performance or any other reason or person. It was literally time zones. And so it crushed me. And I was just like, I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know how I messed up. And like in hindsight, I realized pretty quickly like what had happened, and it was interpersonal stuff. And sometimes that can't be avoided. But it took me a solid, like I was unemployed for about 7 months before I really started my freelance thing. And during that time, like I racked my brain and I went over it and I'm like, what did you do? What did you do? And it took lots of other people saying to me and hearing the story of what happened to be like it wasn't you, Chaviva. Like I'd just been promoted in April last year. I was promoted. I was given a small raise. I got a company-wide award for my commitment and everything to the team, and it was an award that was received by nominations from my teammates. And then I was gone. I was gone in June, 2 months later. So
Wow.
yeah, it was hard, but it was also like the best thing that could have happened to me because last summer I had like an actual summer for the first time since before I was 14. Like I wasn't working, I was just off. Got to hang out with my kids and didn't have to show up on calls or like be on someone's schedule. But it was so funny because like when I was let go of my kids, like they would at like the rest of that month, like I usually had a standing call at 4:30 every day. And so I would go to pick my son up from gone and I was like, we have to get home. I have a call. Like, come on, guys. Like every day was like a rush, rush, rush. And they were like, Mommy, like you don't have a job anymore. Can we go get ice cream? It really like it put a lot in perspective. It gave me time to think about like what really matters. And like I also learned sort of that we're as a family and like me, like we're capable of like living with less than we sort of like I don't need to make a bajillion shekels a year. Like I don't need to have, I don't need to be working and killing
Were
myself while
you make
working.
wait. You were making a bajillion
No.
shekels in this food. Wait, let's
I
talk about that one for a minute.
I mean like I
But
was
I got it.
yeah, no, I mean, I was told when I was applying for new jobs, I had recruiters saying to me, because when I got let go, I immediately, like, I hit the ground running. I contacted all these recruiters. I was applying to full-time jobs, and they were like, oh, your salary expectations are like, you're not going to hit that. Like, you're not going to get that here. And like now even more so, like, because the market's just terrible. But no, I mean, I'm saying like, I watch a lot of freelancers just like kill themselves with like 40 clients and just like and they're complaining about how like they don't have time and like they can't they miss their kids thing because they were on a client call and they were and I was like I'm not like I can't do that, like I can't
Right.
compromise that anymore because I spent my entire professional career doing a lot of compromising. I can't put myself in that headspace, and I'm trying to like really keep myself there because I think it's easy to like get sucked into it and be like, oh no, of course client call, like I can meet you over dinner, or oh, of course I can take on another client if even though that means that I'm going to be in an office head down all summer instead of taking my kids to the beach. And I'm the breadwinner in the family also. I think like that's an important thing to point out. Like my husband, he's amazing and he has a great job and it's consistent. But I've always been the breadwinner. Like it's just the role that I have sort of in our household. And so there's a lot of pressure there, but at the same time, I'm like, I can't put myself in a place of compromising. So it's an interesting place to be. And I have some amazing clients right now, and I'm like doing some cool work. I'm like helping Toro University like completely rewrite one of their entire websites, which is a lot of fun. Working with Monday.com and yeah, doing some fun, cool stuff. But it's not, I still have time to go grocery shopping during the day and bake muffins and do things that I like doing.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
What is something that you feel you learned at Bizaboo, which is now impacting your freelancing?
I think probably the biggest thing that I learned, and it's funny because pretty much everywhere I've ever worked, I've had the same conversation when I started. I always told my managers this, and it was funny always how it played out. And I kid you not when I say, like, everywhere I've worked, I have this conversation. I start off by saying, I am the kind of person who wants to communicate as much as possible and as little as possible. And that comes from being an editor. When you have a headline that you have 3 words and you have to summarize like a 2,000 word article about some very complex topic, right? So when I'm editing someone or I'm commenting on a document, I will be very direct. I'll say, like, please change this to X. I won't say, I really feel like you should change this to X, because it creates a gray area and it's not as direct. If it's a conversation, like, let's have a conversation, like, what do you think about this? Like, I'll do that. But most of the time when I'm editing or I'm communicating, I try to be really direct. And I always have this conversation where I'm like, that's how I function. And inevitably 2-3 months into the job, someone has a problem with me. Someone will say, oh, Chaviva, like, she's so mean and she's so direct and she's so terse and she's so curt. And at every single job, 2-3 months in, my supervisor would come to me and they'd say, so-and-so reached out to me. They sent me this screenshot of a comment you posted or a thing. And I'm like, do you remember that conversation we had, like, when I started? And they're like, oh my gosh, yes, that's happening now. This is it, right? And I'm like, yes, this is it. And it's always like having to acknowledge that it's happening. And then for me to be like, okay, Chaviva, like, you need exclamation points, you need emojis, you need to change the language a bit, you need to soften it a bit. And that was like sort of I wouldn't say recurring, but it came up several times while I was working at Bizzabo. I had one colleague actually who had gone to my supervisor about this. And then it turned out, like, when I actually talked to her about it, because I want to talk to people about it, I want to have the conversation about it. And people always inevitably end up saying, they're like, you know what, I was just having like a really bad day, and like my kid puked all over the car, and then like this happened, and I was just like, I was reading way too much into it, and like, we're good. And that happened with one of my colleagues there. She was like, I'm feeling underwater and I'm overwhelmed, and like I'm reading way too much into everything, and like I'm super sorry because what you said was totally reasonable, and I didn't mean to get you in trouble. And I was like, it's fine, like, it's totally fine. I just wanted to like connect with you on a human level. And that's where video calls do come in handy, because, like,
thank God.
Right? Like, because I can write something in text, but the thing with the text is, like, you don't get the tone and you don't get the language behind it. You don't see the face. You don't get like, you're missing a lot of those things. And so I think that was really like really embedded in me deeply, like, working there. And so now working with clients who, like, they can say goodbye to me whenever they want. Like, they don't, it's not as committed.
Completely freelance.
Completely
right.
freelance. And so I have gotten really good at sort of just like letting things go as much as possible. So if like I give someone feedback on something, because for Monday I do copy editing for them. So like if I give a writer feedback and they're like, oh, but I don't think so, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I just sort of like let it go. I don't fight too hard on things. I'm one of those people who, like, if someone sends me an email about something and I get salty about it, I write the reply and then I delete it. And it's so therapeutic. And that's even text message. I do that on WhatsApp all the time. I do it on LinkedIn.
Wait, hold on. We need to talk about this. Like, stop, time up, go back. Have you ever put it into Chat GPT? Because I know that you are friendly with Chat GPT. You and Chat GPT are like buddies.
We are.
And been like, listen, I know that this is harsh. I just need to get it out. Would you be the person receiving it and like respond to me so that I can just have this argument or get this out of my system, and then I'll make it like write it nicer?
That's so interesting. I've never thought about like hashing it out with ChatGPT. I have gone and said, like, this is what I want to send. What do you think? And it'll be like, oh, like, that's, really great, but like, let's soften this. And then sometimes the output I feel like it doesn't sound like me, so I don't use it. It also sometimes will say like, but what you wrote is also great. And I'm like,
right. That does not help me.
Doesn't help. But I love that. I love that idea. I should do that. I should really do that.
Because hashing it out, what it does, right? What is it going to do? It's going to actually take you to a point where you can actually choose whether or not you feel like being softer is appropriate or not.
Yeah.
And if it is, then writing it softer becomes much easier.
Yeah.
And it can be totally you.
Yeah. No, that's great.
So.
I mean, I use ChatGPT for like everything. It's really my therapist. I have like a whole therapy chat going. I've used it to help like come up with speech therapy exercises for my kids, like book report planning. I use it for everything.
Nice. That's really cool. I mean, I use it a lot too for a lot of different things, brainstorming, things like that. So it's a lot of fun. But like, I definitely have used it when I know that what I'm writing is super emotional,
Yeah.
and like it's coming from a place of emotion, or it's coming from a place of, I know my perspective on this, but I'm willing to bet that my perspective is not match what's actually going on in reality here.
Yeah.
So I will put it in. I'll even put in the whole email string. Like I'll give them the whole thing, and I'll be
Yeah.
like, "This is what I want to write in response. I know it's super emotional. Can we work through this together?"
Yeah.
And it just sort of,
No, I love that because I actually, yes, like literally yesterday, I got some feedback on something, or like someone had commented back on something, and I put it in ChatGPT, and I was like, I'm so confused about the feedback this person sent because it doesn't seem to align with like reality or like how I see things. And ChatGPT like sat there and parsed and broke down what the person was saying and maybe why they were saying it that way. And then gave me like guidance on how to maybe react to it or not react to it, which was very helpful.
right.
Because sometimes also it's a gut check. I use ChatGPT a lot for like gut checking stuff because I don't know if what I'm reading makes sense or if I'm reading too much into it or not reading enough into it.
Right.
I've used that for like countless clients. It's really, I mean, there's so much flack around people using AI for things, especially in the content space. And
Yeah.
and for me, I mean, my husband said it to me. He's like, it's like you hired a content intern. Like, so when I use it for content tasks or brainstorming or outlining or synthesizing information or like, for one of my clients, I'm doing gobs and gobs of interviews in order to write website copy, and it's a lot of content. And yes, like 5 years ago, I would have sat down, I probably would have printed all of it out, and I would have like highlighted things, and I would have done it that way, right?
Snipped,
Like snipped it, like a ransom letter.
Yeah. That's what I used to do. I'm telling you. That's what I used to do. That's partially how I did my PhD, except that I did it like first I did it with photocopy, and then I was like, hey, I can cut and paste stuff now.
That's awesome.
Cut, paste.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, I mean, using it to process information, because there are things that even as a human with, my mind, I'll never see in that copy, in that transcript. So I love AI. I think I'm terrified now that it's going to disappear though. I have this like paranoia. It's like, it's going to go away. And then I'm going to have to like go back to processing information myself.
Doing this all by myself. I can't handle it. Or the other side of it, which is it's going to take over the world.
Yeah.
And I'm going to lose my job because they're never going to need me again.
That one drives me nuts. That's like, there's enough things to be scared of in the world, folks.
Seriously. And you know what? Adapt. We can adapt. We could do this. Okay, so now I just need to know how to prompt it. Wow. Great. So that's my new job. My new job is how do I prompt it for content?
Yeah.
I'm a specialist in prompting AI for content. That's what I do.
Well, and I commented on someone's post this morning about how like companies are always like, oh no, we won't hire anyone who uses AI, or like we're an AI free business. And I commented on her post because she was talking sort of about this, and I was like, people who've adopted AI and who are adept at it and who can use it, like that shows a certain level of really valuable skills that are very helpful in the workplace. Adaptability and flexibility and like future proofing and future thinking and creativity and curiosity, like all of these things that you want. I mean, in theory, I'm assuming companies want that in an employee. I don't know. Do they want curiosity? Maybe they don't.
Sometimes they don't. You know what? I'm gonna say so there are companies that look at I think that a lot of the companies that are AI free, there's two reasons they want to be AI free. One, they don't want their stuff to be used by the LLMs in order to educate. And the only way you can do that is by paying a fortune to have it all secured in your thing. And even then, in your own like little world. And even then, how really secure is it?
Yeah.
But the other one is some people really want people just to follow their guidelines, their rules, they want to have control. And once you bring AI into the system and someone can have this other outside source influencing decision-making, influencing how they're writing, what they're saying, and all that other stuff, as opposed to solely being dictated by internal policy, internal structures, internal systems, SOPs, etc., feels like a loss of control.
Yeah.
And they don't want that.
It's all about control.
It's a big part of it. It's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting. All right. I'm going to take this on a very sharp pivot for a second.
Okay.
This has been wonderful. This has been phenomenal. I want to talk about you and emojis and the fact that you are consistently fighting with the system to get emojis that have your mitpachat, your hair head covering in it. Can we talk about that for a second?
Oh, yes. Because, like all the different ones that are out there, like they all have the hijab and they have like the traditional sort of like African covering that a lot of African women wear, where it's like the knot that just sits on the top of the head. But they don't have anything that sort of like looks like this. And my first thing was and like I was totally joking with my friend about this, but I had a friend who he sort of ran Siri at Apple for quite a while. And I was talking to him about it years ago, and I was like, this is really, like, I feel unrepresented and unseen. And he's like, ha ha ha. He's like, let me do something about that. And I was like, okay. And he's like, send me a bunch of pictures of you like with this head covering style. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah, I'm going to pass on. He's like, I can't promise anything. He's like, but I know a guy over there. Let me see what I can do. And so I sent him like 5 or 6 pictures of me with like this head covering, like the layers or whatever. And it took about a year. And one day he's like, have you updated your iOS yet? And I was like, no. And he goes, update it. And I update it. And I was like, okay. And he goes, check out your Memoji. And I opened it, and he's like, I was like scanning through it, and I saw it, and I was like, you did it. He's like, no. He's like, you did it. And I was like, oh my God, we did it together.
That's phenomenal.
Right?
That's such a great story. See, this is representation, people. This is what we're talking about. Wow.
Yeah. Now it's just getting it in the other places.
Well, like Android?
Well, I mean, I don't use Androids. I don't really care, but no, I mean, there's like Facebook and Meta. I don't think any of the Meta products, like I go in there and I try to update my Meta avatar like all the time, and there's nothing that's even remotely. They have like a bunch of different like head coverings that work for, I mean, they have got a kippah in there, and they've got so many different head coverings for women, like every style of hijab you can imagine, like the half and the full and the head, like all of them. And they have the one with the knot on the top, but they don't have just like this, just like a symbol. And it's crazy too, because this is a lot of Muslim women, cover their hair like this.
Right.
So it's, if they're sort of like playing to the population density of the world, like there are women who wear that. So I don't know. And because it's on Apple, you'd think that it would be like adopted more.
Everywhere.
Right? You'd think.
But it's not.
It's not.
But it's not.
Alas.
I think that's really cool that you had that kind of influence in Apple. That's pretty neat. I like that. That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So we've now taken you through, or you've taken me through, all these amazing stories of your life. I have 2 questions, and then I'm going to turn it over to you for a second.
Yeah.
Question number 1 is, what is one major lesson you've learned throughout all of this that you would really want to pass on to other people who are considering working in your field in general? Ultimately, you live in the content world.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Right? Content creation, content editing, marketing, those all sort of, well, what's something you would want people to be like learning from your experience?
I think never stop learning and never stop questioning and asking and being curious. I think being curious is such a big thing. There are so many influencers in the content world, or people who are very active on LinkedIn who post a lot of sort of shock jockey stuff or make lots of sweeping statements about things and how they should be or how they shouldn't be. And I think that it's important to learn a lot and to read a lot and to learn from a lot of different people, including outside of content, because there are so many things that can be applied from sales or like general business or other fields that you can bring into content that are completely applicable. And I think the other thing is don't let yourself get overwhelmed, because especially like as a freelancer, I can say there are a lot of freelancers in Israel, I mean, the world in general, but there's a lot of freelancers, there's a lot of groups. There are a lot of people who will tell you how you should be working, who you should be working for, who you should not be working for, that you should, offer just a little bit less just to get your foot in the door, things like that. And don't ever compromise. Like I think the biggest thing transitioning from being an in-house content person to being a freelancer is like seeing my value and seeing my worth. And I think it's really hard for people to do that, especially when there's so much noise and there's so many people telling you what they think is right or what they think you should do. And I use ChatGPT a lot for this. Like I gut check my pricing on ChatGPT. I don't ask other people anymore because I found that people don't want to talk about it because everyone's so scared about other people taking their jobs or like coming after them or going to their clients and being like, I can offer you a cheaper rate. And I don't think people are really doing that. I just think there's a lot of anxiety and sort of paranoia about that. So yeah, so just like stay curious, keep learning, and know your value and trust your gut. I'm a big believer in going with your gut. If something doesn't feel right, it's probably not right.
All right. If you were to go back to you at 14 at Burger King flipping burgers, what would you say to yourself right now?
I know it seems so cliche, but it gets better. It gets better. I didn't have the easiest home life, and I had a lot of really big dreams. I was one of those kids who's like, I just want to get out. I want to get out. I want to get away. And it took me a while to sort of do that. But little Amanda Jo Edwards, working at Burger King in Lincoln, Nebraska, like could not possibly have envisioned Chaviva Gordon-Bennett living in Israel and working independently and being where she is now and having worked with the companies that she's worked with. So yeah, I would say to her, like, it gets better. You're going places, trust your gut, and like you're good enough. Yeah.
That last statement sounds like it's important.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I think it's hard being a woman and a mother in most any field. Being a Jewish woman and a mother in any field is probably even harder. But I come from a long line of people who, yeah, I like my family background is pretty wild. I'm like a Mayflower descendant, and my family fled religious persecution in France and rubbed elbows with George Washington in the colonies and had plantations. And I mean, it's
Wow.
it's a pretty storied history. Long line of military folks going all the way back to France, and before that, my grandfather was at Pearl Harbor. My other grandfather was in France for the liberation, although his records were destroyed, so I don't really know what he did. But I feel very deeply in my bones. Amateur genealogist, right? Like I've done a lot of genealogy research. I feel like I come from a long line of people who tried really hard to get someplace and to succeed and to be someone and to find what they were looking for. And I don't think that people always did. I think a lot of people fell short. And so I feel really lucky that I feel pretty settled. Like I don't feel as restless as I did. I mean, I've had 25 addresses and lived in 13 cities and 2 countries. And like, I've been in a lot of places, but I finally feel kind of like in this freelance role after all that I've been through, like working for myself and like being with my family in Israel, like it just feels settled for the first time in a really long time. So
That's really cool.
yeah.
I guess the one thing I didn't talk about or I didn't really ask you was what drew you to Judaism?
Oh, that's a really long story. Actually, I have a short little, I don't know if there's a magazine that a woman puts out here called Her Tribe magazine. It's like a Jewish women's magazine.
I've heard of it.
Yeah. So the Shavuot issue it has a ton of stories of women in Israel who've converted. So I actually I wrote up a thing, and I have my story in there, but long story short, I grew up in very Christian areas. All of my friends were very devoutly religious. My parents sort of raised us on the golden rule. They weren't particularly religious. But I went to vacation Bible school and I did all those things because that's what we did, social activities as kids. But I never really bought into any of it. I kind of had my own concept of what I believed and how like what we do in this life is the most important thing we can do, and being good to people and like, treating people well and not thinking about what comes next because we don't really know. And over time, like I sort of formed my own religion in my head. And when I got to college, my friends staged like an intervention with me with like this pastor. It's a whole story. And I it was actually the reason I started working at the student newspaper was because I didn't want to be available in the evenings after class for activities and interventions and things like this. So I was like, bye guys, like I'm working now. I can't go anywhere. Like here I am. But I was talking to this friend, he's an evangelical Christian, his name is Ben. I think he's a judge now. We were both in the honors program and we were up late one night and he was like, just like lay it on the table. He's like, tell me everything you believe, like just brain dump on me. And so I told him everything I believed and like what my background was. And he looks at me and he's like, have you ever heard of Judaism? And I was like, well, like we did a Holocaust unit in 8th grade. Like we watched Escape from Sobibor and like met a Holocaust survivor. Like that was Judaism. And he's like, no. He's like, you really need to go get a book on Judaism. And so I went out the next day to the used bookstore, got a book on Judaism. It was Anita Diamant's Choosing a Jewish Life, which a lot of Reform converts start with. And I read it and I was like, this is everything I believe. This is everything that I feel. I'm getting like chills as I'm saying this to you. Everything I believe and feel like was in those pages. And that really kicked off a journey. So an evangelical Christian turned me on to Judaism. That kicked off this journey.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it was a wild adventure. I didn't know we even had Jews in Lincoln. Like at that point I'd lived there, 6 years. No clue we had a synagogue in town. Didn't know. But yeah. So, and here I am. I had my Orthodox conversion in 2010. So it's been a long time.
15 years, lady.
Yeah. It's wild.
Wow. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Phenomenal. This was great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us in the Doctor's Den. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hope to see you next time.